9876541. Oh, we're already
What
on.
happened to 3?
I don't know.
And
I don't
2,
like 3.
And 2.
Okay, I just cut to the chase. This is Jim Bridges
And Frantz Kantor.
Yeah.
At the Madhouse. That is the Australian Cartoon Museum in downtown Docklands.
Absolutely, yeah.
And we're getting a phone call, are we?
No, that's just
Anyway,
one
we're
of the
here
cameras
today with Frantz's
going
new
off.
background. See, these are some of the people he's drawn. And
So yesterday we did an Australian stalwart of cartoon history, and that was Stan Cross. Today we're doing Noel Counihan. And
Noel
I'm
who?
here, Counihan?
Counihan.
Counihan. Counihan?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Who a lot of caricaturists in his country believe was the best caricaturist this country's ever produced. He was also a social realist artist and a communist, and he got himself into a lot of trouble. And he was a real character.
So what I've got here is I've just chosen, I'm basing it on this photograph.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of photographs of Neil. I'll just go through a few. This is his work. That's yesterday.
That photograph looks like it's a police lineup photo, doesn't it?
Yeah. So he had a very strong style, very into like graphic design, and unmistakable. It's incredibly powerful work. Really beautiful brush lines. So there he is in his studio towards the end of his career, I think. He had this sort of this interesting style too, which is sort of looks like German woodcuts.
Yeah, he was influenced. That's one from the Vietnam War.
So this is in '67. So it's a printing process which is more aligned to like fine art experimentation, and we'll talk more about his career in that side in a few moments. So he's very good with caricatures. He's quite an accomplished all-rounder, I think. As far as some of his football caricatures.
Ooh.
And this is one of his paintings.
He was
like an early
he was a communist.
Van Gogh.
Yeah, he was a communist, and he did a lot of
Courbet.
paintings of workers and workers doing their work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very haunting.
Yeah, he was an anti-war guy.
Yeah.
That's he was interested in football too, Australian rules, and actually he wrote the. You heard the song "Up There, Gazelle." Well, it's named after a South Melbourne footballer who was really good at marking, and in the dictionary of Australian biography, he actually wrote the thing on Roy Gazelle.
Yeah. Look at that, sort of powerful blacks, use of blacks and things.
He was influenced by Kath Kollwitz.
There's a beautiful Aboriginal mother and child.
Yeah.
Kath Kollwitz, the 1920s designer, painter, or used to do woodcuts and lino cuts and things like that.
I don't think people are hearing her. Oh, there's tomorrow's
Yeah,
drawing.
that's tomorrow, so we're going to go into that. So anyway, let's go back to the picture, and we'll try and talk more about his career as we go on. So what I've done is I've actually created this sort of, based on that photograph, which I could really go anywhere with it, but I kind of favoured this sort of effect of, it's got a very distinctive mouth, so we're going to play with that. But I thought we'd, there seems to be a lot of fussiness at the top of his head. So over on this part where his brain is working, there's these very fine curls of hair, and they're really quite distinctive. So that's something that we could play with. Again, the shape for this is, rather than like favouring a normal oval, I thought I'd push it to a definite sort of plectrum style, almost like that. And from that we can sort of develop, put the relationships, build the relationships back in with the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, which is the T-zone. So create a dialogue which spells out Noel, his face and personality. So based on this design here, this thumbnail, I've kind of worked out a rough pencil to give me some kind of direction in pursuing it. So do you want to tell me a little bit, what's your take on Noel's work?
Well, I had these arguments with caricaturists about who was the best caricaturist in Australia ever produced.
Right.
And
so it's subjective, though, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is. But it's just that I always thought that George Finey was the most extraordinary caricaturist, although he's from New Zealand, but he spent most of his years in Australia. He used to turn people into pretzels, and still maintain their humanity.
They're recognisable features.
Yes, but also, like, you turn them into pretzels, and of course, Paul Harvey, who is probably Australia's most prominent football caricaturist, although John Spooner reckons he's the best caricaturist the country's ever produced, but that's his opinion, and he's no slouch when it comes to caricature himself, John Spooner. Anyway, so he was an artist. Obviously, he was a communist and an artist. He unlike most artists,
is that a relevant part of the conversation?
Well, it is because all his art.
It mainly affects the subject, isn't it?
Yeah, all his art is to do with trying to. Like he primarily drew workers and their work.
Yeah.
And he was anti-war.
Which means he's for peace.
He took up the cudgels of being an artist and being a demonstrator around the same time.
Right.
The Victorian...
and this era was the 50s?
No, this is 30s.
30s.
During the Depression, people were getting a bit cheesed off with, how things were. And the Victorian state government passed a law to stop subversives. Communists. But anybody who complained about the food and all that sort of stuff, what was happening in the terrible conditions during the Depression in Australia.
Right.
So
you couldn't complain about the food.
Well,
like if you're hungry, you couldn't complain.
Yeah, not enough of it, What? Well, what do you mean? What are you talking about?
I realise they didn't have food, but why would they not want you to complain? If
the government wanted to sit on you,
Right.
So he became a political. He was politicised, and he became an artist at the same time. And and he became a communist, a paid-up member of the Communist Party. Right. When a lot of people dropped away, he was a true blue, or a true red. Sorry, true red.
The 30s would be a different era.
Yes, and so
acceptable.
His art is inseparable to his political belief, and he always drew the underdog. He drew a lot of women. He was because he felt that when a society, when things were balanced between men and women, it'd be the perfect society,
a utopian society.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, under socialism, men and women are equal.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea.
That's right.
They're both tools of the system.
And of course, when all the stuff about what Stalin was doing in Russia, putting all these people in jail and all this sort of stuff,
in gulags,
the gulags and things, when all that was coming forward, a lot of people dropped away from the Communist Party, but not him, because he had a physical manifestation of his politics in his artwork.
Right.
And he's one of Australia's major artists, but. We're doing him because he was also probably one of the greatest caricaturists this country's ever produced. He used to do caricatures, football caricatures. He was obsessed with football. He grew up in South Melbourne, and he broke for South Melbourne.
So you've got a film out on one of his books.
Yeah, we did a film the other day. It's on our website. It's a book bite.
And how do you get to the website?
You're
talking about the channel, right?
Yeah, cartoonmuse.com.
That's the website, but what about the channel, the YouTube channel?
Oh, that's toontalk.com.
No.
.show, sorry. Toontalk.show. He's got me. He always got me. Anyway, this is an unusual portrait you're doing because you normally don't do straight-on faces.
I try to avoid them, but it's a funny thing with straight-on faces. It's really hard to they're really hard to draw sometimes, but even more interestingly,
is that because
they're hard to pose.
Is that because there's symmetry involved?
There's symmetry involved.
No, is that why it's hard to draw, because there's symmetry involved?
It's because there's symmetry involved.
Did I put my comma in the wrong place?
You forgot the asterisk and the footnote.
Yeah, asterisks.
What do you mean by symmetry involved? Because, you need movement, and a caricature is like a cartoon. It's like an animated, like drawing for animation. You try to entertain yourself, and you do that by finding the rhythm and the movement within the geometry of the face.
Yes, but most people's faces aren't completely symmetrical, are they?
No, but that's the interesting thing, you see.
But people think that they are, and so when they're drawing somebody...
Yeah, you look for things that are not symmetrical.
Yes.
Yeah, and those are the interesting cues.
Yeah, but that you're not taught that. You have to learn that from mistakes.
Oh, by mistakes.
Yeah. The best way to learn stuff is by mistakes, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
anyway, so you've sort of moved his head slightly around so one ear is bigger than the other one, so...
Well, he is. So I'm just taking that as a cue and exaggerating a little bit more. I'm also creating an emphasis. So size and structure, shape and size relationships between the different forms of the face. It's all to do with the emphasis, like you're stressing certain parts of a sentence, So you're stressing certain parts of the sentence. There you go. Does that stress you out?
Hang on, I'm just wiping off the excess stress.
So the
so he was a demonstrator, and he became a demonstrator, and
a different thing to me. I'm demonstrating.
They had these demos in Sydney Road.
You're remonstrating.
They had these demos in Sydney Road, and
which is
the
different
corner of
Sydney
Road
Sydney
and
roads.
I think Nightingale Street or something. Can't remember the street now, but. So he became politicised, and he was arrested a few times.
Yeah.
And one of his claim to fame was that they drove a truck up, and he was in a cage on the back of the truck, locked in there, and he was giving speeches. And of course, you weren't supposed to give speeches. They tried to stop all that stuff during that period, and so the police had to go get cutters to cut him out. And I mean, it was a good idea because it's a practical idea. How can I give my speech without getting arrested straight away?
Put yourself in a cage.
Put myself in a cage, on the back of a truck.
So it's an interesting metaphor as well.
Well,
that's very
creative.
Clever.
Yeah, very creative.
That's very clever.
Yeah. Anyway, he was born in 1913, and about 18. This is when he became an atheist and a communist and an artist all in one go.
Right.
And he helped found the Workers' Art Guild, because there were all these sort of guilds for artists, but they were all sort of highfalutin ones. And he was a true red communist. So he got into printmaking and liner cuts and lithographs. He did magazines for communist magazines and papers and pamphlets, and he even designed communist banners.
So just to reference this properly, so the lino cuts it's a cheap form of printing.
Yes.
So it's done by the actual artists themselves.
Yeah, you get you just
so as such,
gouge out the levels of the
lino,
and you put the ink on the top of it, and you just put on paper on it.
Yeah, and you use a press and you roll it out, and that's it. It's a quick, simple way of publishing.
Yes.
So if you wanted to be a political artist, this is a perfect device for you.
Yeah.
Also, actually, graphic design.
You didn't need a machine
or
special inks and all that sort of stuff.
You did. You do need special inks, lino.
Yeah, but I'm saying
printing.
It's not like you need a printing press to do it.
No, this is like the simplest of printing presses. It's how Albrecht Dürer
Guerrilla printing.
Yeah, Albrecht Dürer used to do that.
Oh, yeah, but he did a lot of other stuff too with God,
Yeah, rhinos and things.
Yeah. He was the first one to draw a rhino.
Was he?
In first one to draw a rhino.
Apart from the cavemen who drew furry rhinos.
Yes.
Which were a European animal.
The furry ones, that's right.
Yeah, beautiful European animals. The hairy rhinos, the miniature hairy rhinos.
You see, I like him because he was a caricaturist, and he worked for the Bulletin and the Guardian, which was a communist paper. And around about Second World War, he was against the war, but he couldn't be called up because...
he was a communist?
No, because he had TB.
Oh.
He had TB, so he went overseas and he came back with TB, and he spent 6 months in a hospital. Over at Kew, I think.
Oh dear.
Very interesting.
I don't know much about TB, but...
TB or not TB?
It's one of those things that you have for the rest of your life. You've got to sort of manage, like...
Anyway, there was a guy called Yoshi Bergner, who was a refugee, Jewish refugee from Europe, running away from the Nazis. And he came to Australia, and he met him, and he encouraged him to get into paint. So he started painting.
Yeah.
But he followed the social realists, which were people who painted recognisable portraits of people. They weren't influenced by the art styles at the time, you know,
Cubism,
abstraction and all that sort of stuff. And of course his heroes were people like Dormier.
Yeah.
Dormier was actually, a lot of his stuff is...
social realism.
Yeah, a lot of his stuff is very similar to Dormier. He used the same techniques.
Yeah.
Lithography, you know.
Lithography?
Yeah.
As opposed to lithography?
That's the stuff,
yeah.
Where you have a greasy pencil and you write on stone. That's how you
I'm
do
not
it?
actually sure
that's
about
how they do it on stone.
Is it? So
it's also another cheap
wax
version.
resist form of printing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And of course,
so again,
his heroes were people like Goya and Dormier. Dormier did time for his cartoons. He was arrested.
Oh, I was going to say it's too early for the Time magazine. So he was arrested for anti-establishment.
Well, he drew a portrait of
Napoleon.
No, of Philippe.
The king.
Yeah, King Philippe.
Yeah.
And it's three faces in one.
There's a butt in there somewhere.
No, there's the front face. He drew him as a pear.
Ah, there you go.
And a pear, the slang name for a pear, the French slang name for a pear was
father.
A woman's vagina.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. So he always drew him as a pear head.
Right.
So he got arrested, and in this portrait, this triple portrait.
Isn't that interesting? How would you phrase that in a court of law, though? Because that's a pictorial. It's your influence if you're aligning the pear with the word pear, right? But
the point is the king got his way, and the publisher.
But presumably
the publisher
king would
and
have
the artist were both. They did jail,
right.
But the publisher, when he got out of jail, you weren't allowed to draw him anymore. But what he did, he published the
just a pear.
No, he published the instead of having straight columns of print. He had the print going away, so there was this white gap in the page in the shape of a pear.
Oh, okay.
And so he got away with stuff like that. And of course, the King Philippe was very unpopular, and he ended up running away. So you know, these guys lived to tell another story. You know.
So,
and the thing is, you see, Counihan, besides following the style of the social realist, he believed that everything he did, that all artists have a duty to gather information about the political developments of the time and actually express it in their work. He really believed... I mean, a lot of people do that anyway. They reflect their time, but he wanted to make things better for everybody. So he was a socialist.
Yeah.
Big time, you know.
Yeah, I think most people are aware like a...
But because he was a stirrer, and he got into all sorts of trouble, like he went to New Zealand, and they kicked him out of New Zealand because he was arrested for something, for some demonstration, and so he invented all these names for himself.
What aliases?
Yeah, aliases. So he was Cunningham.
Ah,
and he was
clever.
He called himself C, just the letter C. He was Barry. He was Leon, and Leon is Noel spelled backwards.
Yeah.
He was Snap, and he was Yakka.
So he would do. Why would he do that in posters and things, street posters?
Yeah, so he couldn't be caught, and also because.
So these are like tags. How our graffiti artists would use tags today.
Yeah,
this was a pseudonym that they would use.
Yeah.
To get away with
on the covers of the magazines, the newspaper cartoons, whatever,
yeah.
you know. But if you use Counihan, I mean, that's it. Like, he was banned on the media. He wasn't. They wouldn't let him on radio or television, early television. You know.
Really?
No.
Why?
Well, because he was a communist. He was a straight-out communist, and he was going to talk about communism whenever he got the chance.
Mm.
Anyway, he was widely travelled. He went all over the world, and he's published in places like London, Melbourne, Sydney, New Zealand,
Moscow, China,
Warsaw, Prague. You know, all over.
Yeah.
And he set up things. He became he was a foundation member of the Workers' Art Club, and he also helped set up the Print Council of Australia. Later on, he was the president.
Yeah.
And he was the chairman of the Victorian Printmakers Group.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, he also did caricatures for all sorts of things. I remember he did a colour caricature, a full-page caricature of Marilyn Monroe in the Everybody's magazine.
Ah.
And it was by Leon, and I was always trying to track who this Leon guy was, but, you know, I found out later who it was. It was Counihan. Yeah, and he met Albert Namatjira, and I'm about 55, and he sketched his portrait and did a painting of him. And then Namatjira...
So this is like an Archibald entry or something, I guess?
Don't know. I think it ended up somewhere. It's a famous picture anyway. But then Albert Namatjira, because of the laws at the time, Aboriginals weren't allowed to buy alcohol.
Land. Oh, yeah.
They weren't allowed to buy alcohol.
Right.
And of course he was famous and he had money. Namatjira was famous and he had money. So his relatives, I don't think he drank himself, but his relatives asked him to get beer for him. So he got them beer, and of course he was sprung, and he was jailed. So Counihan led the way to trying to get him out of jail.
Yeah.
You know. And the thing is, he got out of jail. I think he died 3 weeks later after he got out of jail. It was a real.
It was a very
real scandal.
Yeah.
Real scandal. And he was interested in Australian art, like the Eureka Stockade, and he did work on the Eureka Stockade.
What do you mean work on it?
Well,
like painting
he did,
as a subject.
He did prints.
Ah, yeah.
He did prints, and he organised a whole bunch of other people to do prints on the whole story. You know. And he illustrated for Overland magazine. Yeah.
So you could tell with this, you see the receding hair, it's usually the way it's pushed back, it's and favoured the cranium, the full cranium. This thing here that's the house. That's the house of the brain, the seat of wisdom.
And in his case,
push stuff back.
Yeah.
Then you're revealing the house of wisdom. You're revealing wisdom. So there's a lot of powerful brainy stuff happening in here, and not a lot of conflict. There's a lot of clear, there's a lot of clarity in his thoughts. So there's not a lot of conflict there.
Yes, so, last
he's
Sunday,
very sure of himself, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, he definitely was. Last Sunday, Paul Harvey and myself premiered a film about him, about his caricature work, and next Sunday, we'll have another film we made about his football caricatures, and it was really wrapped in football, and he didn't use photos. He would go into the clubs, he'd go into the club rooms and draw them, and he was even doing paintings of football later on in life. I think we saw one before.
Yeah. It's all about the action and finding.
And he had a terrible childhood, and he said the only time he felt like he was a family, they had a family, is when they went to the football.
Right.
Where they all sort of barracked for South Melbourne and they all cheered at the same time. It's the only time he actually felt...
Part of the family.
Yeah, because his mother and father were very mismatched. And
so they fought a lot.
They had huge arguments.
Yeah.
He had no experience of art whatsoever in his life until he was...
an adult.
Yeah, until he was about 18 when he was politicised. He discovered art and politics at the same time.
Yeah.
And those things virtually ruled the rest of his life.
Mm.
But he sided with his mother, and also the whole thing about Russians talking about how women were the same as men and all that.
Yeah. Socialism. Yeah.
Yeah. He did a lot of paintings about women, and
So his mum was his hero.
Yes. And
yeah, like my mum.
They were poor Catholics. They were poor Catholics, but she actually got him to go to the St Pat's choir college for choir boys, and he couldn't stand it because he was starting to rebel. So he used to scream and yell as much as possible at the football to wreck his voice, and he even smoked deliberately,
right,
just to wreck his voice. Anyway, his mum put him in against his father's will, put him into Caulfield Grammar, where he did 12 months. Anyway, he got a job.
Make it sound like a prison, Caulfield Grammar.
Well, no, it's a private school. They were poor.
6 on probation.
She worked really hard to put him in this private school. He only lasted a year, and then he went out and got a job.
I could tell you stories about private schools. Yeah.
Publicly,
you want to grow up fast. They're like prisons or army. They're like the army.
Yeah.
Horrible places.
So you've actually gone to school, because most of your stories are you stayed home.
Well, with private school you have to, because...
Oh, you have to, yeah.
Your parents are paying for the
privilege.
The privilege of being beaten up and...
But did you get any privilege, that they paid for? Have you got any privilege left,
No.
No privilege?
Some
people respect you.
My mum loved me.
Yeah, only a mother
so
could.
That was a privilege.
Only a mother could, yeah. Anyway, he got himself kicked out of the Catholic school and he went to Caulfield Grammar. Then he got a job, and he was about 18 when he discovered communism.
Right.
And he got himself arrested, and because he got himself arrested, his father was so upset about him getting arrested that he threw all his he burnt all his art books and all his things he was reading, all his
Marxist manifestos.
He just burnt them all.
Yeah, as you do.
As you do, yeah.
Little Stalinists.
Well, my father burnt one of my books.
Was it a communist manifesto?
No, it was...
Karl Barks.
It was The Group, the book The Group.
I don't know what that is.
It was a famous novel about women, and had some sex scenes in it. And my dad said my son wouldn't read that book, and of course I'd lent this book to my mum's friend, and she was giving it back. And anyway, he made a fool of himself in front of this woman, so he went out and burnt the book, and we didn't talk about that for a long time.
Right.
Fathers had that ability to burn books in the 50s and 60s.
Did they?
Yes, they did. Yeah, so his father burned his books. But let's talk about his football. So he used to go he was nuts about football, and he used to go into the club rooms and sit around and sketch from life. He wasn't interested in using photos, he sketched from life all his life. And even in the end of his career, when he was in his 70s, he was still doing lots of life drawing. He loved it,
Yeah.
He even took himself and his wife and his 2 boys to a small...
Commune?
No, a small village off the beaten track between France and Spain.
Oh, that one?
No one knows about this place. No tourists don't ever go there. And he sat there and he drew hundreds of sketches of women, peasant women, and doing, carting goods and heavy things and all that, and carrying water and all
more
that.
workers.
Yeah, so he wanted to get pristine workers as opposed to these Parisian workers who've been tainted by the big city lights.
Right.
Gee, you've got a great nose there, mate.
Yeah, I've taken liberties.
You've taken liberties, yeah.
So the idea is to see a shape or a possibility for a shape, and then go for it.
Well, his ear's terrific.
His
ear's terrific. It's all, it looks like there's a nose trying to burst out of it. It's so good,
Yeah. Well, it's just a possibility.
You've done a good job on the hair too, and the eyebrows.
So
I think he's got.
It's a good face, good, strong, clear face, very clear. It's a shame there's not many photographs of him because, he's got a good face.
Yeah, well, let's have a look.
I'm happy with the portrait, with the reference at the moment.
Yeah, well, this is
quite.
This is a side view.
Yeah.
But you don't do side views.
No, I can do side views.
You do 3/4 views.
But I've chosen this one at the moment, so we're kind of in the process of finishing off this.
All the portraits I know of him were when he was older, and he had white hair and that,
Yeah. So
handsome face.
He's very intellectual, very very much in his thoughts, and you can see there's a lot of clarity in his thoughts.
Well, a lot of people were very young and impressionable when they became communist.
Yeah, but then they get all twisted and later on,
and then they give it up.
If you look at Stalin's face.
Well, hang on, they give it up.
Started out looking like a criminal and then ended up looking like an evil criminal.
Yeah, but I don't think Stalin was a communist at all. I think he was a bastard,
Yeah, he was more a
total bastard, Anyway, so he retained his communism.
Yeah,
like a lot of people, just after they, after
Stalin and the war and
what they were doing in Hungary and places like that.
Yeah, Czechoslovakia.
Yeah, they fell away, but not this bloke. He still believed in socialism.
Yeah, well, socialism.
And to a certain extent, he would have had to shove his head in the sand because of what was going on with communism.
Well, yeah, but I guess I think I had a conversation with a socialist in the 70s and a communist in the 70s, and he was of the opinion that socialism itself has to change. So if the whole world was socialist, there wouldn't be rorts like China or Russia.
So China's a rort.
Well, I think back then there was more of a concept that that they weren't true socialists. They were more opportunists.
The anarchists / communists used to sell a magazine called Direct Action.
Yeah.
And they'd be outside the railway stations.
Yeah,
and
but they were about Australian communists, not about Russian communists.
Yes,
it wasn't a Chinese model or a Russian model.
Anyway, I remember I was in the city, and this young student selling Direct Action. Here, get your Direct Action. Here, step up, And this old bloke came up to him and tore him to pieces because he used to be an old communist himself.
Yeah.
And he started telling me, what about when they went into Hungary and all this, and the gulags and this young kid didn't know what hit him. He didn't know anything about that, you know. And he just tore him to. I stood and watched it. He just tore him to pieces. It was like a. I wonder what.
Well, there's a life lesson there.
Yes, I think that kid went home and turned in his red badge.
Red badge.
Oh well, yeah, or threw away his little red book.
Red book, yeah.
The little red book.
Little red book.
That very few people read. They just carried around and held it up like the Bible.
You held it up like the Bible, yeah. That's the thing. Was it in English? I think it was in English.
It was definitely in English, yes.
Yeah, someone convinced a printer to publish it. So yeah. I was kind of mystified by all that stuff because I was just a little kid.
And during the Vietnam War, he did all these
protests.
Well, he was still doing all his art.
Parties?
Most of the stuff he did during the Vietnam War was all about the Vietnam War. That stage, you know, does heroic stuff of workers carrying things and
Right. Yeah. So that influenced by the European and Chinese propaganda posters. Which
not really. They were more like Kath Kollwitz.
Kath Kollwitz.
Yeah, her work.
Yeah.
And Dormier,
Yeah. Well, I think
not so much the Russian or the
Chinese,
epic stuff with fist raised and all that stuff.
I love that stuff. That's extraordinary. I love the Chinese propaganda.
Well, also the thing about the Chinese propaganda, these things were very big.
Yeah.
They were very big, like they'd be 30 feet long and stuff like that. There's a tradition. I mean, when I was in...
public posters.
Yes.
They're put up on buildings.
When I was in China...
not a lot of TV, I guess, to take your mind off.
No, not a lot of TV, no.
So you have to entertain yourself in other ways.
You can't get the wood, Yeah. So, they had they've got this tradition. I remember going into an art gallery in Japan, in China, and there's these big drawings on pencil, and they're 15 feet high by about 20 feet long, and it's all pencil.
Yeah.
Huge things,
Yeah, no, it's an amazing culture. And
but a lot of it, when the Red Guard period, I was in a factory that they were going to turn into a cartoon museum, and they never got around to doing it. And you could smell all the diesel oil and that, but on the walls up the top were all the
graffiti.
The graffiti that done by the Red Guards.
The Red Guards did graffiti.
Yeah,
anti-party graffiti?
No, they were pro-party. The Red Guards were, what's his name? Mao Zedong was losing the battle with his mates. With his mates.
Right.
And so he actually said... to
hell with you guys.
No, he actually pushed forward the idea that young people know better and to take over. And so... This is the whole thing about the Red Guards.
The youth revolution.
Yeah. And then they went around and they denounced their school teachers and all that sort of stuff. Anybody they didn't like, and doctors and all sorts of people. Anybody who had authority copped it.
As not communist enough.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
What a
good old days. Good old days.
Yeah. That's the trouble with Russia and China. They don't have sport.
They don't have sport.
They don't have soccer.
Don't they?
No. Well, they do, but it's,
It's severed heads or something.
can you imagine if England and France and countries like that didn't have sport, though? They'd probably have revolutions every 5 minutes, That's a magnificent ear.
Well, I think,
It's practically carved. A little dabble, do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what... other than the football caricatures, he did caricatures of
he worked for the Bulletin, and they had a whole page where they would do stories about characters of different people, and they were all always illustrated with caricatures or fine drawings, mostly caricatures. And he was doing work for the Bulletin in the 30s, but he got sick of their politics because they were too right-wing for him, so he left. And he worked for the Sun News Pictorial doing the footy things, and they were very small things, like they were just little pictures that filled in a column. So they're about 2 inches across by about 3 inches high.
Right. So these are like spot illustrations.
Yes, but and the great thing about his caricatures is that he had a different, he would change. He didn't use the same materials all the time. Depending on who it was, he would change...
The material?
The material, yeah. And if a guy had really sort of crazy hair...
He would use steel wool?
Whatever. And actually, he left out a lot. And there was a guy who had such a crazy head, the shape of his head and his hair.
Just put a banana there.
No, but he didn't even bother
it's one of your favourite tools.
He didn't bother putting eyes or even a mouth in the picture, and everybody knew who it was. You know what I mean? He did stuff like that.
Well, that's the part of when you do caricatures. You try to. I've found a shape that I like. This plectrum, right? So I'm obviously elongated a little bit, but that's what I like. So I'm sticking to that shape.
Yeah.
Now I realise his head's oval.
Yeah.
But I am.
And he's got a reasonably strong chin, but you down, you know.
Well, yeah.
He hasn't got a glass jaw.
No.
But somehow you're retaining his artistic dimensions there with his eyes. He looks slightly looking into the distance here, but here you've got him almost like focused.
Yeah. The other thing too, I just wanted to very quickly say, the face is covered with tendons and muscles and areas of soft tissue.
Bit of skin.
Yeah. So the main areas that you need to focus on are obviously the features and things. But if you were to put in some reference of the hard structure underneath the tissue, so wherever usually the skull touches the surface or close to the skin, in the forehead and in the cheeks, so you can see how sharp these elements are, right? So even though the photograph doesn't show it, even if you were to just subtly reference the cheekbones, like I'm doing there, right? It just makes it feel right. So, caricatures and drawings are more about like going for the feeling rather than what you actually see. So it's an impression of something. And in fact, the whole shape itself, the choice of the shape, is based on my impression. So I'm really entertaining myself. I'm enjoying this process of creating the face, irrespective of whether it's a likeness.
Is his nose broken? Or it's just the angle?
It's just a shape.
Okay. No, I'm talking about it in the photo, is that?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Yeah.
It's not obviously
I'm just thinking that
like
because he was very argumentative.
Yeah. I don't know. So it could be, maybe. Why not?
Anyway, in Sydney Road, there's as part of the town hall, the Brunswick Town Hall, they've got a section there which is called the Counihan Gallery. Mm-hmm. And
what, today?
Yes, it's called the Counihan Gallery.
Go and have a look.
And they have a few Counihans in there apparently. And not far from there's a plaque on the corner where they had those demonstrations, where he was in the cage.
Right.
And there's a plaque on the corner there somewhere talking about those days.
The good old days.
The good old days, yeah.
Yes, very interesting man. Let's try to get some
actually
more
in the caricature film we made that came out last Sunday. He uses this device as well.
The frame.
Yeah.
Frame within the frame.
Yeah.
It's a thing that a lot of illustrators use, like Drew Struzan, who does a lot of movie posters and things, but it comes from we respond very strongly to shapes. The simpler the shapes, the better. So this is just a device that I use. A lot of illustrators have used that in the past, like Norman Rockwell used to use graphic elements like the circles and things. So you would have the action that has a reference to this background, simplest of shapes.
Like that.
Yeah. So it's sort of like a very stagey, very artificial way of turning.
But also the
picture
circle. I mean, it's a frame within a frame in a frame. It's and he's bursting out of the frame, so it looks three-dimensional.
Yeah. Well, that's part of the sculptural part of the drawing.
But the use of the circle as a frame is just. It's universal. I mean, most posters have a lot of circles in them. Most ads have a circle in them, and it makes the eye move around the whole picture.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's just something that if you're at all interested in graphic design or composition, it's something that would occur to you naturally. I think it's just one of those things. So what I'm trying to do here is increase the contrast side of light and dark. So putting in textural accents of shine. So skin, especially in areas of oil and moisture around eyes and lips and things like that. Anything that's wet usually has has some corresponding texture that is that's shiny.
During the war, there were a lot of American soldiers stationed in Australia on R&R or whatever. And there were a lot of, that's when prostitution seemed to come forward a lot, but much more public. And you had artists like Albert Tucker, Australian artist Albert Tucker, who drew the prostitutes, but he did them as glary, sort of clown-like figures. Whereas Trollops, yeah. But garish colours with huge lipsticks and stuff like that.
Dear.
But he painted them as well, but he did the complete opposite. He didn't turn them into Virgin Marys, but he was talking about the
women,
the reality of the women who had to do that because of money and all those things.
Exactly. Good on him.
Yeah, so that's
it's terrible that making this it's sort of taking a whole class of people and denigrating them for some some prurient reason.
One of his paintings is a couple sitting down. The bloke's eating his meal, and the wife has just got a hand under her chin, just looking off into the distance, like,
"Why did I marry him?" Yeah,
that's right. And some art writers say it's the first feminist painting ever done in Australia.
Well, good on him. I admire that. I think that's a good thing. We all have mums, so just to...
Yeah, mum's the word.
Yeah. I think it's important to, realise the most important part of humanity. What are we without mums? We're ships without rudders. Enough of this philosophical...
Well, I mean, your mum used to buy you comics.
No, I bought the comics.
Yeah, but she made sure you got the money to get them.
Yeah. She did. The
power behind the throne, huh?
The throne. I don't know if I'd call it a throne, really. This is a bit of a... I'm using this Posca pen, this brush pen, and it's quite nice. It can get thin and thick, but I think it's running out of...
Posca.
So, I'm looking for things in his face here, little elements of shine that I can maybe play up a little bit, but I don't want to overdo it because, when you start colouring in as opposed to creating form, light and shade, you actually detract from the line work because it becomes a different story, a different sort of dialogue.
So why do you have white next to black in a continuous line?
Well, that's part of the side light or the backlight that's coming through from the other side of the light.
Yeah.
But so it's artificial.
I know it's artificial, but it's
It just gives it a more of a dimensional property. The same reason why I'm doing a thick line around certain parts of his face. Oops.
Well, it makes them prominent and also stand out.
Yeah. So you have a lot of his works, or?
Yeah, mostly his football stuff. Actually, I gave a talk on him once, and I took a file. I gave a meeting, a cartoonist meeting, and I gave a talk on him. And at the end of the evening, someone had knocked off the file.
Because it was full of football stuff.
No, it was full of political stuff mostly.
Oh.
I had to go through all these old. I went to the Communist Archive and a few other places to get all this stuff.
Right.
But his stuff turned up everywhere, you know. As I said, it was in Everybody's magazine, which was Everybody's was like a teenage magazine. Do you remember Everybody's?
No.
It was a large size magazine in the early 60s.
I wasn't a teenager in this.
And they had the full page colour drawing of a caricature of Marilyn Monroe, you know.
All right.
Wearing that white dress.
From Some Like It Hot?
No, from you know, where she walks over the
Isn't that Some Like It Hot?
No.
It's
She was wearing a black dress, walking down, and the train shoves the hot air against her dress. But it's what is it? The film where, you know, where she stands on the railway grid and her dress comes up.
Yeah.
That white dress, silky dress. But as I said, when you look at his caricatures, he would just change styles to suit the head, the person. So he would, you know, he'd be doing something with a pen, and then the next drawing it'd have you know, he'd go nuts on the hair. He'd really go nuts on the hair, and he had thick and thin lines, all sorts of stuff. It was just.
Well, I think
he seemed to have all these different styles when it came to caricature.
Yeah.
But when you look at his work, his paintings and his everything else, it's within a slotted style. But his caricature in particular, he could go anywhere he wanted, which is why he's so exciting. He was influenced by George Feinie and the Simplicissimus school, the Germans who, you know, who would.
Simplicissimus.
Yes, Simplicissimus was a German magazine that had a distinctive cartoon style.
Right.
I mean, people like...
after the war?
No, it was before the war. Actually, Hitler closed it down. It was a satirical magazine. It got stuck in everybody. And people like Norman Lindsay, in particular, was totally influenced by it. You know, if anything, he was copying stuff, you know. But people never saw that stuff here, so they just thought he was an original. But a lot of what Norman Lindsay did was just straight Simplicissimus copies. Especially there's a guy called Heinrich Clay.
Yeah.
Kley.
Yeah.
Not Clee.
He was an influence on Fantasia.
Yes, he was.
Hippopotamus.
All those elephants.
And elephants
and crocodiles and hippopotamuses all dancing together. Yeah. And he was one of the great draftsmen of all time. He had this most incredible plastic spasticity about his line. Just extraordinary, and had so much life and verve in his line.
Pep and vim.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's a lot of stuff to consider when you're doing a caricature. So this argument of the likeness you create by building a relationship between these elements of the face, the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And with a caricature, of course, you're changing proportions. But you're changing proportions and keeping a relevance. It's kind of an ongoing battle or a dialogue that you have continuous.
It's a juggle.
Because
if you push those ratios too much, it just goes.
Sometimes, but you get other things that happen, like Searle used to push relationships a lot with recognition to the point where you can.
Well, I don't think Searle really cared about. I don't think Searle really cared about
caricatures.
No, about the getting the likeness. I think he was just interested in that line. His line just gallops away, by itself, in a way.
Mm. So it's a very interesting proposal with caricatures. A lot of people have, they have the ability to create a likeness, but to challenge yourself and push shapes, I think is a much more fun way of looking at it. I think so, anyway. For me, and it's all about me. I don't care about whether it's a accurate likeness or not. I'm just interested in the challenge. So, it's a very interesting. I find it a very interesting proposal. This face. Noel. I've shut up because I can't spell and talk at the same time. I've got to find his name now.
Yeah, H-A-N. You got it there.
Counihan.
In pencil, H-A-N.
There you go. All right, so that's...
And that's how he ended up.
Yeah, that's how he ended up. Let's go back to there's that photograph. Looks very affable there, isn't he? But within those lines are a very intelligent and compassionate human being. So that's Noel Counihan, and this is Frantz Kantor and
Jim Bridges.
Saying we'll catch you
on the flip side.
Bye bye.